Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. After getting out of prison, he went to his girlfriend's grave. When he bent down, after 12 long years in the cold, unforgiving bowels of State Prison Huntsville, Nathaniel Nate Carter finally walked through the gates of the penitentiary, dressed in civilian clothes that were too baggy for his body, emaciated by years. The wind outside slapped him gently, as if to remind him that he was a free man again, at least in appearance. His gaze rose to the gray-tinted sky. The world had changed. More modern, faster. But he bore the marks of another time. He was only 22 years old when he was torn from his life, accused of the most abject crime, the murder of the woman he loved, Emily Dawson. Today he had some 34 wrinkles had creased the corners of his eyes, not the lines of laughter, but the lines that anger, loneliness, and betrayal patiently carve. His gaze, once gentle, had become darker, wary, and sharper. He had spent 12 years shouting his innocence into the void, 12 years rewriting the scene 1,000 times in his head, reliving the last evening he had shared with Emily, seeing her smile again, her voice, her hand in his. And then, the shock, the arrest, the handcuffs, the detective's cold stare, and above all, the implacable silence of Emily's father, Richard Dawson, a renowned, ruthless, respected prosecutor and consumed by pride. The same man who had used all his influence to ensure Nate was convicted, without a shadow of a doubt, without a chance. Even his own friends had drifted away. Even Nate's mother, shattered by shame and the media, had eventually fallen ill and died 2 years after his incarceration. He had nothing left, except a place. One place that still mattered, where everything had stopped, where love had turned into grief, then into a legal nightmare. Ashwood Hill Cemetery. He walked for hours, refusing to take a taxi. Each step on the asphalt was a way of regaining control over his own body. His worn boots trod the sidewalks of a city that had learned to forget him, but he had never forgotten. He knew the road by heart. When he finally arrived at the wrought iron gates of Ashwood Hill, a shiver ran through him, not from the cold, but from what he was about to face. The cemetery was empty at this early hour. Dew covered the grass and tombstones like a silent blanket. The sky was low, laden with milky clouds, and a solitary raven perched on a granite cross seemed to stare down at it. He walked slowly down the aisles, reading names, dates, until he saw her. Emily Dawson, 1990 to 2013. You were the light in the darkness of this world. Nate felt his throat tighten. His legs buckled slightly, but he remained standing, like a soldier at the feet of his fallen general. He knelt, placing a trembling hand on the polished stone. It was clean, well-maintained, fresh flowers. There were pink peonies and white lilies. Someone came here regularly. Maybe Evelyn, Emily's sister. Maybe someone else. He took out of his jacket a white rose, the same one he gave her every year for her birthday. It was a promise he had never broken, even behind bars. He murmured, in a deep voice, broken by time, "I'm sorry, Em. I would have given anything to protect you. I loved you more than my own life. They took everything from me, but they could never erase your memory." He closed his eyes for a moment. The wind picked up, carrying the damp scent of earth and sorrow. Then, as he bent down to place the rose on the flagstone, something caught his eye. A small plastic bag, discreetly hidden beneath the wilted daisies. He hesitated. His fingers trembled. Was it a note left by another loved one? A farewell note? A poem? He tore the plastic open with a feverish gesture and took out the folded sheet. The writing was fine, elegant, feminine, and strangely familiar. Every loop, every stroke, it looked like Emily's writing. He read, "You didn't kill the wrong person. The truth still lives. Look where it all began." And he read it again. Once, twice, 3 times. And her heart skipped a beat. Her mind began to spin violently. Emily? No, it was impossible. She was dead. He had seen her in that coffin. He had wept over her body. But that writing. He stood up abruptly, his gaze troubled. An inner voice, which he thought had long since died away, had just awakened. Someone knew. Someone was talking to him. Someone wanted him to dig deeper. And maybe, just maybe, the truth was about to rise from the darkness. The next morning, as the city slowly awoke to a pale light, Nate pushed open the door of a small, faded law office on the south side of town. The name on the plaque had remained the same, Tasha Green. Criminal defense figure he hadn't seen in 12 years slowly stood up from behind a desk cluttered with files and cups of cold coffee. Tasha Green hadn't changed. Or rather, she had changed like him, worn out, scarred by the fight against a deaf system. At the time, she was just a young court-appointed lawyer, thrown into a trial too big for her, facing an untouchable prosecutor and a bloodthirsty media. But she had done her best. And above all, she had always doubted his guilt. When she saw him come in, she didn't speak right away. She stared at him for a long time. Then her face broke into a smile that was a mixture of sadness and relief. "Nate Carter," she breathed, standing up. "I was wondering when you were coming." They sat down. Silence hung for a few seconds before Nate spoke. "I'm out, Tasha, but I'm not free until I know what really happened that night." She nodded slowly. "You deserved better, and I deserve to defend you better, too. But I wasn't given the means. I was grounded before I could even plead." Nate stared at an invisible point on the table. "Emily had a sister, didn't she?" he asked. Tasha nodded. "Evelyn, they were very close. Very inseparable. It was strange, in fact, that she didn't come to the trial, or even to the appeals hearing. Just disappeared. After your conviction, she left town overnight. No one ever heard from her again." Nate's heart raced. He pulled the carefully folded note from Emily's grave out of his pocket. Could be Evelyn Dawson. This message. Maybe it's her. Maybe she finally knows the truth. Maybe she saw something, understood something. "I have to find her, Tasha. I have to know." For 2 days, Tasha used her resources, searching through old university records, cross-checking administrative records, and verifying reports of altered identities. A hacker friend helped her overcome the last digital barriers. Then, a clear trail emerged. Evelyn Dawson now lived in New Orleans, under the name of Claire Bellamy, a literature professor in a small college in French Quarter, a discreet, isolated life, without social media. Nothing to attract attention, almost as if she were hiding. She did everything she could to keep her hidden, Tasha said, handing over the file. "But you're right. Something doesn't add up. She knows something. And maybe she's finally ready to talk." Nate took an overnight bus. The ride was long, endless. He didn't sleep. He kept replaying Emily's voice in his head. Her laughter. Her scent. And now, this letter. This mysterious this rendezvous with the past. They found themselves in an old cafe on Chartres Street, decorated in the old-fashioned style, with tarnished mirrors and wrought iron chairs. The smell of strong coffee mingled with the dampness of the French Quarter. The rain fell slowly and finely on the cobblestones. Evelyn entered, holding a dripping umbrella. She wore a simple gray coat, and her brown hair was hastily tied back. Her eyes, Emily's, were ringed with anxiety. When she saw Nate, she stopped for a moment, frozen. "Nate." Her voice trembled. He stood up, hesitating. She sat down opposite him, and for several seconds they looked at each other without speaking. Then she placed her hands on the table, clasped together. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I kept this secret for too long." Nate felt his throat tighten. "So, is it true? Do you know something?" Evelyn closed her eyes, blinking back tears. "Emily had discovered things, serious things. Documents in our father's briefcase. She had told me about it one evening, scared. He was soaking in a laundering network, Nate. Millions of dollars. Offshore accounts. And worse, ties to Mexican cartels. She wanted to report him. She thought she would go see a journalist." "So what?" Nate whispered. Evelyn stared straight into his eyes. That evening, she went to confront him. She thought she could reason with him. She wanted him to surrender, but she never came back. A shiver ran down Nate's spine. He killed her. She nodded slowly. He panicked. He had everything to lose. His career, his image, his freedom. He used his contacts, fabricated evidence. And you, Nate, you were the ideal culprit. "I'm sorry." He knew your reputation as a troubled teenager, your juvenile record, your neighborhood. Everything would count against you. Nate's world spun. His breathing became more labored. He placed a hand on his chest, as if to keep his heart from exploding. 12 years. 12 stolen years. A whole life. To cover a monster in a three-piece suit. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I was 18, Nate. He threatened me. He said he'd send me halfway around the world, that I'd end up institutionalized or dead. And I was scared he'd do the same thing to me he did to her. A heavy silence fell over the time-worn cafe. Around them, the murmur of other customers formed a blurred canvas of sound. But at their table, only the metallic clinking of spoons on china disturbed the palpable tension. Nate and Evelyn looked at each other, each carrying the weight of years of pain and secrets. Then, slowly, Evelyn removed a small, leather-bound notebook from her bag, worn by use. She placed it in front of Nate carefully, as if entrusting him with the key to an invisible safe. "Everything I discovered," she said in a low voice, almost a whisper, "is in their accounts. Names, money transfers, recordings. Even Emily's personal journals, where she confided her doubts and fears. There's also a voicemail, recorded shortly before her disappearance. In it, she talks about what she knew and what she feared." Nate felt his fingers tremble as he reached for the notebook. His eyes widened at the mass of information, a mixture of hope and terror. This small relic contained the truth that had been wrested from him. He didn't cry, not yet, but deep inside him, a flame ignited, fragile but bright. A rage he had suppressed for years, a fierce desire for justice and reparation. This fight was only just beginning. Later, in Tasha Green's cramped office, they spread out several thick folders on the table. Copies of voice recordings, excerpts from Emily's scribbled diaries, bank statements proving suspicious movements on secret accounts, and most importantly, a voicemail recorded in Emily's bedroom, in which she expressed her visceral fear. "If anything ever happens to me, look to Dad. He won't stand for me destroying his reputation." Tasha, her eyes burning with emotion and determination, listened to each piece of evidence. For the first time in 12 years, she felt that justice could be turned. "This time," she declared, "we're not letting anything slide. We're going to reopen your case. But we can't rely solely on local justice. Richard Dawson is too powerful. He has allies everywhere." They chose another weapon, the harsh glare of the media. Evelyn recorded a poignant testimony in which she courageously recounted her family's ordeal, the fear, the secrecy, and the love she felt for her missing sister. Nate, for his part, agreed to appear in an exclusive interview with a major national investigative network. "I want everyone to know who I really am," he declared into the camera, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not a murderer. I lost a part of my life. But I'm going to fight for justice, for Emily, and for all those who suffered in the shadows." The story of a broken man, victim of a corrupt system, resonated deeply with millions of Americans. Social media ignited. The hashtags #JusticeForNate and #TruthForEmily went viral. Calls for a federal investigation grew louder. Faced with mounting pressure, Richard Dawson fiercely denied all accusations in a press conference, using his incisive language and influence to turn public opinion. But the tide had turned. Voices that had previously remained silent began to be raised. 3 weeks later, federal forces arrived at his home. As his servants watched helplessly, Richard Dawson was arrested and charged with murder, witness tampering, evidence tampering, and money laundering. In front of the cameras, handcuffed, his arrogant face froze in an expression of stupor mixed with anger. Justice had finally turned its attention to the right target. Nate, Evelyn, and Tasha found themselves exhausted but victorious, knowing that this was only the beginning of a long battle. The weight of the years wouldn't disappear overnight, but there was hope. The truth had come out, and sometimes that was enough to revive lives. The day of Nate's official release was bathed in a soft, almost surreal light, as if the sky itself acknowledged that justice had finally been served. Outside the massive gates of Huntsville State Prison, a crowd had gathered, much larger than he had imagined. There was Evelyn, her face marked but radiating strength. Tasha, still determined and serene, and even several faces from his past, old friends, strangers who had followed his fight and now came to apologize, hug him, and offer words of comfort. Nate watched all this with a strange distance, his heart heavy but at peace. He wasn't seeking revenge or anger. These years of injustice had taught him the value of inner peace. He wanted to rebuild, to give meaning to his life, to what remained of his shattered dreams. That evening, as the sun was setting, Nate walked back to Ashwood Hill Cemetery. Silence enveloped the headstones like a cloak of respect. Emily's grave was surrounded by fresh flowers, placed there by Evelyn and other loved ones. Nate knelt, the weight of the past pressing down on his shoulders. But this time, it wasn't pain that dominated, but gratitude. He removed a small, neatly folded envelope and a discreet case from his pocket. He whispered, "Em, you saved me, even in death. You were my light, and you remain so. I will carry you within me, forever." He placed the envelope on the stone, then carefully opened the box. Inside lay a white gold engagement ring, set with a small diamond, the soft glow of suspended hope. "I never had the chance to give it to you, but I entrust it to you today, so that you know that, despite everything, my love is intact." A tear slid down his cheek, but he let it fall freely, without shame. It was a silent promise, an offering of eternity. A year later, Nate walked the bright hallways of the headquarters Emily Dawson Foundation for Justice, an organization he created to give a voice to those like himself, whom society had broken. Evelyn was the co-director, bringing her strength and sensitivity, and Tasha led the legal side, a tireless warrior for the law. Every case they opened, every person they helped, was a step toward a truer, more humane justice. Emily's memory was the beating heart of this mission. In every public speech, Nate always began with these words, which became his mantra, his standard. "I am the man who was broken, but also the man who was raised up. And as long as I live, I will fight for those who are being silenced." For Emily, for the truth. His voice carried the pain of the past, but also the strength of forgiveness and hope. And each time, the audience was captivated, moved, and inspired. The nights sometimes remained long, haunted by memories. But Nate had learned to dance with his demons, to transform pain into strength, anger into determination. He knew now that justice was not just an ideal, but a fight to be waged every day for all those society forgets. And in every look of a saved child, in every smile torn from injustice, he felt Emily's presence, gentle and luminous, guiding his steps towards a fairer future.